All right, welcome back to the Jason Gray Show. Let's talk about what happened today. First Republic Bank borrowed $30 billion. Yes, $1 billion, but not from the Federal Reserve, from other large banks. This is intriguing. Now, this happened before, but you don't hear this very often. There must have been some type of backstops and communication with the Federal Reserve over this weekend and through this week of sort of saying, the optics-wise, we might need you guys to lend people some money, and in turn, we'll backstop this money. That's the only thing I can think of here. There's no other reason, right? And I know that a lot of the big banks over the last, few days have had huge inflows of money because everyone's, taking their money out of the smaller mid-sized banks. So let's talk about this. So Chase, Citibank, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America gave them, and we're going to include Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, $30 billion. Now, by giving them this money, they had to probably up from some type of collateral, right? Put that collateral up front, and the Federal Reserve is probably guaranteeing that money. And so this is going to keep these guys alive for now. Now, how much longer can they last is a good question. The Federal Reserve must have thought that they're going to be viable enough to keep them open, or they would just close them down today. Now, this happened today, Thursday, on the 16th. So now let's talk about what's going on with the money that they set aside for the banks that are struggling in regards to their assets. And we talked about this with Silicon Valley Bank, that they had assets on the books, but the maturity dates haven't hit yet. And so since the Federal Reserve has been increasing the short-term interest rates, these bonds that they're holding on to, unfortunately, went down in value as the Federal Reserve was increasing their interest rates. This asset become less valuable. And, of course, it would hit 100 cents on the dollar when it came to maturity, but if you try to sell that asset early, then you have to take a penalty. And they were taking 40 cents on the dollar. So the Federal Reserve set up this side account where this $25 billion was set aside. If you had some undervalued assets, but you needed money right away, the Federal Reserve would give you dollar for dollar, 100% on it, and they would lend you money back. Well, they set aside $25 billion for this. And like I said in my previous video, $25 billion is not going to be enough. We're on week number 1, and today they report. So every week the Federal Reserve has to report their balance sheets, and part of it is this program. They've already used up $11.9 billion, right, with a B, billion dollars of this money. And so what does that leave them left, right? $13.1 billion. Is that going to only last them another week? And so I said before, I think they're going to have to increase this asset here. But let's talk about some other numbers. The banks have to do this thing called an overnight lending, where they borrow money on overnight lending, because sometimes their assets don't come back and forth quick enough. So they have to sometimes go to the Federal Reserve, borrow that money, and then return it back right away within 24 hours. Now listen to this. Through that, they lent out $148.3 billion on that. We already talked about the $11.9 billion they lent out on the bank term funding program is what they call it. But listen to this. They lent out $142.8 billion on the banks that they seized by the FDIC. So through this 1 week, they've lent out $303 billion of our money, or this money out of the thin air somehow, to keep these banks afloat. Now, you might have heard Credit Suisse yesterday got bailed out by the Swiss government and their Federal Reserve. So these banks are definitely struggling. They're having a really hard time right now, and the numbers are going to get worse. I can't tell you how many banks are going to go under. Maybe no banks go under, but I got a feeling there's quite a few banks are going to take over. I think they'll take over a few this weekend, right? They'll evaluate what happened through the week, take a look at people's balance sheets, and then come back and say, okay, you're done. We're taking you over. And so this weekend will be interesting. The next 2 to 3 weekends that go through, same thing's going to happen. They're going to just evaluate this, and they're going to see what happens. This $25 billion is not going to last. And then it's going to put shockwaves through the stock market. Now, between what was taken out today and these numbers that they've already lent through the Federal Reserve already, it'll be interesting to see how the stock market reacts to this after hours in Asian markets, European markets, and then the opening on Friday for the stock exchange. So this is going to be a pretty interesting next 24 hours. Let's see what happens. Let's see who gets taken over the weekend, and we'll go from there. It's an interesting time. We dealt with this before, and I'm sure they'll deal with this again. they're becoming very creative, and they're obviously creating a little bit of a shell game, in my personal opinion. So thanks for watching my video. Like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.